If you say sorry when someone bumps into you, then this is for you. If you apologize when the waiter forgets your drink or forgets your food, maybe you say sorry if you need some help carrying some bags, or maybe you start text saying, I'm so sorry to bother you, even when you're just asking a friend for, time that's free, then this is for you. So I'm Monique Rhodes, and I want to talk about people pleasing and the slow, quiet erasure of yourself that happens when you've spent years apologizing for existing. So I want to start with something that happened to me not so long ago. I was at a cafe with a friend, one of those cafes where everybody knows your name, right? The barista knows what you're going to order. Anyway, it was a place that my friend was very familiar with, and the barista knew her orders. And she asked for a flat white, I think. And instead, the barista made her a long black and slid it across the counter and smiled. And I remember my friend taking that coffee and saying, thank you so much, and walking to the table, sitting down with a drink that she didn't want and feeling vaguely guilty, right? And I was like, what is going on? She's sitting here looking at this coffee that she didn't even want. And I thought, what on earth is happening? The barista got the order wrong. And she's the one that's feeling apologetic, not with words. She didn't say sorry out loud, but she was clearly feeling like it was her fault. And she made herself smaller so she wouldn't have to feel awkward. And so what she did was she absorbed that inconvenience. She didn't go back and tell the coffee that she wanted because she just didn't want to make a fuss. That is people pleasing. Not the dramatic version, not, the person who agrees to everything, but just that tiny, ordinary moment of choosing someone else's comfort over your legitimate need. Again and again and again. Here's another one. A few months ago, I was on a call with someone and I was telling a story mid-sentence, and I accidentally interrupted them. I'm a Taurian, right? We do this sometimes. I kind of interrupted. I talked over them by mistake. I felt really bad. And do you know what they did? They stopped talking and they said, oh, I'm so sorry, go ahead. So they apologized for me interrupting them, for talking, Isn't that interesting? And I remember talking to that person about it, and I said, listen, I'm the one that should be apologizing. And for them, it was a reflex that was so deep, they didn't even notice that it was happening. That little sorry just fell out of them, it's just waiting to. And I've been thinking a lot about where that comes from, because it's not random. People don't just wake up one day and decide to preemptively apologize for taking up space. It's learned. And it's carefully, thoroughly learned. And usually when we were very young. I remember when I was, a kid, there was a very particular atmosphere in my house, and I had to become very good at reading that. How kids can walk into a room and know in an instant before a single word is spoken what the emotional weather is. I got very skilled at that, and I know a lot of you have done that as well. And I learned that if I could sense the mood shifting, if I could just make myself a little quieter, a little more helpful, a little less present, then things stayed smoother. Because my needs felt like a disruption, and my voice felt like a risk. So I got small. Not because I was told to in so many words, but because being small felt safer than being seen. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I'm not describing anything catastrophic. But I think a lot of us, maybe most of us who find ourselves in this pattern, have some version of that story. A house where it was better not to need too much, or a parent who was overwhelmed and we didn't want to add to their pile of responsibilities. Or a school where you learnt that fitting in meant you shouldn't be standing out. Or a dynamic where love felt conditional on you being an easy child. So apology becomes a survival strategy. It's not a character flaw, it's not weakness. It's actually a very intelligent response to an environment that gave you that feedback over and over, that you were safe or small. So the problem is, and this is the thing I want you to hear, the problem is that strategy follows you. You take it into your adult life. You take it into your friendships, into your relationships, into your workplace, into your body language. And it stops being survival. And it starts being a little bit of a cage. You know, there's a name for this, and I'll mention it briefly because I don't want to go into all the jargon about it. It's sometimes called the fawn response. So it's the part of you that learned a long time ago that the safest thing to do when things felt tense or uncertain was to make yourself agreeable, palatable, easy. You know, you had to anticipate other people's needs and hand them to them before they even asked. So there was no friction, so there was no disappointment, so there was no conflict. And that fawn response kept you safe once, genuinely safe. And the part of you that does it, it's not broken, it was clever. It's just that it's still running a very old program in a world that doesn't require that of you anymore. But here's what it costs. When you're always apologizing, when you're always shrinking, when you're always making sure your edges don't inconvenience anyone, you lose things, real things. You lose your voice because you've trained yourself to drop it at the moment anyone pushes back. You lose your needs because you've told yourself so many times that your needs are a burden that you stop fully knowing what they even are. You lose your edges, that particular shape that makes you uniquely you because you've spent so long sanding them down for everyone else's comfort. And there's something else that you lose which is subtler, but I think it matters really the most. You lose the experience of actually being met by someone. Because when you're always performing ease, or when you're always preemptively making yourself agreeable, the people in your life never really get to meet you. They meet the version of you that's been edited for their comfort. And that is a very lonely way to live, even when you're surrounded by people who seem to like you. I want to tell you about a friend of mine. She lost her dad last year, and it was expected. You know, he had been ill for a while, but it was still a loss, the way that these things always are. And I was with her at the service, and she cried. Of course she did. And afterwards in the car, she said to me, "I'm really sorry for crying like that in front of everyone. I'm so sorry." She apologized for crying at her father's funeral. And I remember looking at her and saying to her, "What exactly are you sorry for?" And she didn't have an answer. She just had this reflex, this deep old reflex that said, your grief is too much. So pull it in, make it smaller, apologize for the inconvenience of your feelings. I think about that moment a lot because her grief was not inconvenient. Her grief was real, and it was hers, and it was completely appropriate for where she was at. But she had been apologizing for taking up emotional space for so long that even in the rawest of moments of her life, the apology was right there. It was ready. So what do we do about this? I don't want to hand you a list of steps, because I don't think a list of steps is the right thing for a situation like this. But this is slower work than that. It's more like noticing, genuinely noticing. But I do want to give you one experiment to try because I think it can be illuminating in a way that just thinking about this isn't. I want you to go one whole day without saying sorry unless you actually did something wrong. That's it. That's the whole experiment. Not forever, just one day. And just notice how many times you almost said it. Notice what it feels like in your body when you stop saying sorry. Notice the little pull of anxiety that says, oh my God, what if they think I'm rude? What if they're uncomfortable? What if they don't like me? The pull, that is the old program running, and noticing it is not the same as obeying it. So you don't have to perform your growth. You don't have to make a big announcement. Just quietly for one day, save your apologies for when you've genuinely done something worth apologizing for, and see what happens. All right? I think of this as one of the hardest things about unwinding people pleasing is that it can look like politeness from the outside, can feel like kindness. And we don't want to become people who are rude or inconsiderate or who stomp through the world without any awareness. That's not what I'm asking you to do. There's a real difference between genuine consideration, like actually really caring about the people around you and factoring them in, and compulsive self-erasure. So one comes from abundance, from actually having a self that feels steady enough to extend your warmth to other people, and the other comes from fear. It's from that belief that you're taking up too much space, and if you do that, something bad will happen. And you've probably been doing this for so long that the two can be hard to tell apart, but your body usually knows. Real consideration feels open, feels like a choice. And compulsive apologizing feels like a breath that you're holding. It feels like bracing. So you didn't learn to make yourself small because you were bad or weak or too sensitive. You learned it because you were adaptive, because you were clever, because some part of you figured out the rules of the room and you followed them to keep things safe. But you're not in that room anymore. Or if you are, you're bigger now. You have more options now. You don't have to earn the right to be here by shrinking. So I want to leave you with something, and I want to say it plainly because I want you to know how much I mean it. You are allowed to take up space. You're allowed to have needs. You're allowed to have real ones, inconvenient ones, the kind you've been minimizing for years. You're allowed to have feelings at difficult moments. You're allowed to want things from people. You're allowed to ask for what you need without wrapping it in 10 layers of apology. You're allowed to exist without apologizing for it. And the next time someone bumps into you and you're inclined to say sorry, let them say it. That's theirs. I hope that's been helpful. As always, be kind, take care, go gently in the world.